there, morbid maniacs. It's time for another spooky video, a part of Vlogtober. And for tonight's spooky video, I'm going to be talking all about the West Virginia State Penitentiary. I have been putting this video off for so long. You guys have no idea. I've been wanting to make this video for so long, and I'm just now getting around to it, so I hope you guys enjoy. The West Virginia State Penitentiary is located in Moundsville, West Virginia. It operated from 1876 to 1995, holding over 2,000 men at one point, and nearly 1,000 dying there. During its operation, it housed the worst of rapists, murderers, and thieves. The prison itself was built on top of an ancient burial mound. Many have experienced feelings of being shoved, having their hair pulled, disembodied voices, and the apparition of an infamous shadow man of one of the most haunted prison facilities within the United States. During the Civil War, West Virginia seceded from Virginia in 1863. And the new state was in an immediate need of public institutions, including prisons. Building these places would take time and money. The West Virginia Governor, Arthur Borman, lobbied the new West Virginia legislature for a state penitentiary, but was repeatedly denied. As a result of this, prisoners were held in existing county jails or were sent to institutions out of state. Many criminals were jailed within a small structure in nearby Wheeling. It quickly became overcrowded, and in 1865, 9 inmates escaped. Afterward, the state legislature finally took action, and in February of 1866, approved the purchase of land in Moundsville to build a state prison. The 10-acre land was convenient as it was just 12 miles south of Wheeling, which was the state capital at the time. A wooden prison was built, which housed prisoners. In the meantime, officials would work with architects on the design of the new prison. They chose a Gothic-style design that was similar to the 1858 Northern Illinois Penitentiary at Joliet. The state used inmate labor as a way to help in the construction process. The first structure to be built was the North Wagon Gate. Work on the first phase of the prison continued until 1876. The north and south cell block areas both measured from 300 by 52 feet. The north wing was initially used as a kitchen, dining room, and chapel before additional cells were gradually added in the 1890s. South Hall had a total of 224 cells. In between the cell blocks was the 4-story administration building that included space for female inmates on the 3rd floor and personal living quarters from the warden and his family on the 4th floor. The 2nd floor would serve as a hospital. The facility officially opened in this year, and it had a prison population of 251 male inmates. This included inmates who helped with the construction of the prison. After this phase, work began on prison workshops and other secondary facilities. In the next decades, more improvements were made to the facility. In the early 1900s, the prison included several shops in which the inmates worked, including carpentry, paint and wagon shops, stone and brick yards, a blacksmith, a tailor, a shoe shop, a bakery, and a hospital. The revenue from the prison farm would help the prison financially. During this time, the prison's conditions were good and education was a priority for the inmates. A school and library were built in 1900. They had a baseball team, which some inmates would play on, and church services were held in a large room on the 2nd floor. By the 1920s, the female inmates were moved from the administration building to a separate 2-story building located in the corner of the North Recreation Yard. This building was separated from the main part of the prison. In 1921, a prison coal mine was opened about a mile away, and this helped the facility with energy needs. Inmates would be allowed to stay at the mines camp under the supervision of a mine foreman. In 1929, the size of the prison doubled and overcrowding was an issue. 3 men were assigned to stay in a 5 by 7 foot cell. 2 prisoners would sleep on the bunks, and a third would sleep on a mattress on the floor. Inmate labor was again used as a way to build on a new wing, and it would be completed in 1939. More expansion was planned, however it was delayed by the World War II and wasn't entirely completed until 1959. During these years, conditions worsened and the facility was ranked by the U.S. Department of Justice as one of the top 10 most violent correctional facilities in the country. Conditions would continue to deteriorate even more in the 1950s when overcrowding was once again a major problem. Again, 3 prisoners would be forced into a small 5 by 7 foot cell. There were 80 women prisoners until 1947 when women would be transferred to a new facility in Pence Springs, West Virginia. On November 7, 1979, there was a large prison break when about 15 inmates had escaped. During this escape, Ronald T. Williams would steal a prison guard's service weapon, and he would then have an encounter with off-duty West Virginia State Trooper Philip S. Kesner, who he shot and killed. Williams would continue committing crimes throughout the nation over the next 18 months, and even sending letters, threatening letters, to authorities. He had even killed a man in Arizona during a robbery within these 18 months. And after making the FBI's 10 most wanted list, he had became involved in a shootout with federal agents at the George Washington Hotel in New York City in 1981. He was captured and was then returned to West Virginia to complete several life sentences. And as of January 2019, he remains in West Virginia custody, meaning like 3 years ago, he was still alive and was still staying here in West Virginia. In 1983, convicted and famous serial killer Charles Manson had requested to be transferred to the West Virginia State Penitentary, but was thankfully denied. During the prison break, the communication between the state and the officers was said to have been very poor. By 1986, the prison was undergoing several problems, including loose security, plumbing issues, insect infestations, and once again, overcrowding with a population of more than 2,000 men. During this time, security was so loose that some described the facility as a cons prison, where most of the locks on the cells had been picked, and inmates roamed the halls freely. And in January of 1986, when the prison was short-staffed, a group of 20 prisoners, which were named the Avengers, the mass hall and had attacked a man by the name of Captain Glasshawk, hopefully I'm saying that right, 5 other officers, and a food service worker. All of these men were slammed to the floor and handcuffed with the officers' handcuffs. More hostages were taken during day 2 of this riot. And during this riot, 3 inmates were killed. Negotiations with Governor Arch A. Moore Jr. resulted in a new list of rules and standards on which the prison would operate. None of the hostages were seriously injured. The same year, the West Virginia Supreme Court ruled the confinement to the 5 by 7 foot cells as cruel and unusual punishment. Over the next decade, the population was reduced to the building of more prisons. By 1995, the facility held only 600 to 700 inmates when the decision was made to close the facility. During the time that this prison was operating, almost 1,000 men had died within this prison, and 36 of these deaths were due to murder. From 1899 to 1959, 94 men were executed at this prison, with 85 men being executed by hanging. And these executions were usually opened to the public. That was until June 19, 1931, when an inmate, Frank Heyer, had been going in for the execution of murdering his wife. He was being hanged, and unfortunately when the trap door had opened, he had fell and he was instantly decapitated. Afterward, the attendance of these executions would only come if the person were invited. The last man to be hanged at the prison was a man by the name of Bud Peterson from Logan County Cemetery after he passed away because his family refused to claim his body. In the early days, hangings would take place within the North Wagon Gate. Later, the main hospital building became the place for death row and the execution room. And beginning in 1951, electrocution was the main source of execution. And they actually had their own electrocution chair, which one of the inmates had actually made themselves, and they nicknamed it the Old Sparky. This would take place in a building known as the Death House, where there were 4 holding cells on the first floor. This building no longer exists today. Prisoners who died by execution or other causes were usually buried within the White Gate Cemetery if the relatives did not claim their bodies. The graves were assigned a license plate type of marker. There are no buildings or structures which surrounds the prison farm or the coal mine. And after the prison had closed, the Moundsville Economic Development Council leased the complex for 25 years. Today, it serves as a dual purpose as a training facility and a tourist attraction on an ancient Native American burial ground. The prison is right across from the Gray Creek Mound, one of the largest type burial mounds within the United States. Some believe that the negative energy from the deceased Native Americans have made their home within the prison, resulting in some of the paranormal events which happen there today. Hauntings have been reported all the way back from the 1930s. During this time, an inmate was often spotted walking along a maintenance area where prisoners were not allowed. In some cases, the guards would set off alarms, but there was no one there and no inmates unaccounted for when they investigated. The old recreation building in the basement, which was nicknamed the Sugar Shack by prisoners, was known for gambling, drug deals, rape, fighting, and murder. Unseen people arguing, talking, and whispering. Others have heard unexplained noises and have felt cold spots within the room. The whole basement area is said to be haunted by a maintenance man who once worked there. He was said to have spied on prisoners and would be quick to alert the guards of any news. In retaliation, he was stabbed several times with shives while he was using the bathroom. After his death, his spirit is said to haunt the basement, and many have reported equipment malfunction. The North Wagon Gate is said to be home to one of the most active ghosts within the penitentiary. The area once held an execution for a man by the name of Orville Atkins in 1938. Here, visitors will describe a very evil feeling and the uncomfortable feeling of being watched. Mysterious sounds and disembodied voices have also been captured on EVPs, and the ghosts of the condemned are often seen. The gate is said to be haunted by Orville, who was condemned for kidnapping a minister who was later found dead. His footsteps are said to be heard pacing slowly back and forth. The North Hall was where the prison's worst offenders were placed, not for the crimes which they would commit outside of the prison, but for the crimes that they would commit within it. A biker by the name of Danny was stabbed several times in his eye and had actually passed away from his hemorrhages. The other was a man by the name of William Red Snyder, who was convicted of murdering his parents and then dismembering their corpses. Red was disliked by many of the inmates and was usually involved within several fights. In the end, he was attacked in front of his cell and was stabbed a total of 37 times. These stabbings would become fatal to Red. Folks are said to still hear his voice coming from within his cell, and his cell itself is said to be very haunted. The hall has been the site of many strange paranormal occurrences, including photographic anomalies, equipment malfunctions, the sound of cell doors banging when no one is there. Many have reported feeling very uncomfortable. In the solitary confinement area, many people have reported feeling cold spots and the feeling as if they had just been touched on their backs. Other hotspots for paranormal activity are death row, the psych ward, the chapel, shower cages, dining room, and the boiler room. And there is one particular entity who is known as the Shadow Man. And I believe even on the episode of Ghost Hunters, they had like an encounter with this Shadow Man. I can't remember, so don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure I remember them having an encounter with the Shadow Man. He usually lurks within dark places and comes in the form of a dark black shadow with zero visible features. He has been described as being very intimidating. Many women have made claims of their hair being pulled. Throughout the prison, visitors and staff have reported seeing fleeting glimpses of apparitions, smelling unpleasant odors, hearing strange noises and echoes, feelings of being watched, and a disembodied voice that says,
"Help, I'm trapped."
Visitors have also felt brushed, tapped, and even shoved by invisible hands, and cameras will capture ghostly mists, faces, figures, and orbs. Some have seen the ghosts of prisoners in uniforms walking the halls and disappearing into the walls. The West Virginia State Penitentary is considered one of the most haunted prisons in the United States, and has been featured on many shows, movies, and video games. So there was the long story and history of the West Virginia State Penitentiary. What do you guys think of this very haunted place? It is honestly on my bucket list to go and investigate sometime, or even just to visit there. I'm sure I would capture something. Very, very haunted place. I'm sure I didn't even cover like most of it, but that was the gist of it. But please let me know if you've ever been to the West Virginia State Penitentiary, and if so, did anything spooky happen to you while you were there? I'd love to know. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a big ol' thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and become Morbid Maniac. Be sure to hit that bell notification, that way you get notified every single time I upload a new video. And I love you guys so much, and thank you so much for watching.